study. But it was originally intended for internal use by alternatives. However, the living wages released to the public was encouraged by Alternatives Board of Directors, and we're proud that now, for 27 years, this study has stimulated important discussions about the meaning of earning a living wage and provides a benchmark for others to use. By tuning in today, you may be someone like me who believes the legal minimum wage should be a living wage. We didn't originally calculate the living wage in order to start a movement. We did it to be a good and fair employer with a dedicated staff which could participate in the local economy. But we're very glad for the living wage movement. Our living wage study started when an alternatives entry-level teller complained that she wasn't earning enough to pay her expenses. And our now retired Chief Operating Officer, Lenny Hochman, at the time, could have told the employee that Alternatives was paying the going rate. But instead, Lenny wanted to know how much a single person would actually need to live in Tompkins County, albeit frugally. And then the study was born and adopted. Alternatives Board of Directors supported raising wages to a living wage, and all staff supported the resulting compression in wages across the organization. We believe the living wage is so important, and we recognize the living wages calculation is the bare minimum to pay an employee, because many people who've had to live on our calculated living wage know it's not easy. It's a starting point for a single person, but it could still take 2 incomes or more depending upon an employee's circumstances. We also recognize our hourly staff at Alternatives work very hard. Their jobs are very demanding. Most recently, our frontline essential staff show up day after day during the pandemic and took on more and more responsibility. We couldn't expect this great member service and morale paying mere poverty wages. The bottom line, we believe the living wage is a wise investment and the return on investment is great. It's great for the employee, it's great for the employer, and it's great for the community. And we're happy this day is here to update the wage calculation once again. I'm now going to ask Pete Meyers, the co-founder of the Tompkins County Workers Center, to say a few words. Pete?
Thank you so much, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure, in fact, for us to partner with Alternatives every 2 years in updating the living wage figures. And I believe we've been doing this with Alternatives since 2004, when our organization started. Actually, in 2003, our organization started. And I will say that wages have been a personal issue to me ever since I was a young adult, very young adult. And it seems to me that the disparity oftentimes between the owners and managers of businesses and organizations of wages and salaries for people in such roles contrasts so much oftentimes with the lowest paid workers that it seems grossly unfair to those workers that actually are dependent upon to make an organization work. As point of reference, our first 3 years of existence, which we started formally in 2003, we were the Tompkins County Living Wage Coalition. So living wage is in our bones to the core. We broadened our work early on back in 2003 to include a workers' rights hotline, which has been very successful to this day. And we've had over 5,000 people that we've worked with through the hotline. And of course, we do many other things with workers in the workplace. So we're just a very holistic workers center in a sense. Obviously, I don't know that people know this, but we actually had the first living wage employer certification program in the country. And we're immensely proud about that. 18 new businesses applied for and received first-time certification as living wage employers since the last study took place in 2019. Presently, we certified 102 living wage employers, and of particular significance, I will say, there have been a couple much larger employers with traditionally low wage traditionally low wage industries, including Green Star, and I noticed we have a HR rep from Green Star, as well as Ithaca Marriott downtown. We have the Kathy Hart, our the general manager from the Marriott. It's been the Living Wage Campaign's mission overall. Again, we're not doing just living wage certification. We're actually working on a campaign they would mandate a minimum wage be paid to every single worker in the county. And that's been ongoing for 6 years. And as you might imagine, it's not an easy campaign. I'm just going to leave you with this experience that I had 16 years ago, which really helped to inform my work, both with regards to living wage, but just overall. We were doing a Walmart living wage campaign. Walmart actually opened its doors in 2005, as many of you will remember. And our campaign was really focused on getting Walmart, encouraging Walmart to pay its workers a living wage. And I was staffing an organizing table in the Commons one day in the summer, and a young woman stops by the table and says, "What's this about?" And she says she works at Walmart full-time as a cashier and makes what at that time was the minimum wage of $6 an hour. And she actually thought that she didn't deserve any more than that. And it just really emphasized to me, it's not only about the legislative change. Obviously we need to guarantee minimum wages that are not just basic subsistence wages. And I will say a couple of years ago, Rob kind of brought the idea up of the living wages being the basic subsistence wage. And that always really stuck with me because that's what I think a living wage is. It's the bare minimum that a single person can survive on. So I just put all that out there and just thank everybody for being here today. And am I introducing Kevin next, Michelle, or are you doing that?
We can pass it back to Eric, who can introduce Kevin. We'll all fight over who can introduce Kevin. Thank you so much, Pete. We'll pass to Eric. Thank you.
I got it. I invite our CFO, Kevin Meitlicki, to share a few words at this time and discuss the new wage calculation. Kevin, in addition to being our CFO, also supervises our community programs, including business and economic development. Kevin, take it away.
It's good to be fought over, and I apologize for my flickering camera, but you ought to come to look at me. So what I have to share is that Alternatives, we have had the pleasure of updating this study every 2 years and take immense pride in this work. Doing business with a living wage employer is important to many of our members. Alternatives leadership in the living wage movement impacts many people in Tompkins County, including member businesses inspired by our example and their employees. The more this is used in our community, the bigger the impact will have on many of our members that work at or near that living wage spectrum. I'd also like to thank a few people. I'd like to thank Cornell University ILR School for once again providing a student to assist us in gathering all the information that goes into the study. And I want to recognize Carl Graham, who for a long time has had oversight over this project. And the announcement that you want to hear is I would like to announce that the 2021 calculation for a livable wage in Tompkins County is $15.32. It's slightly lower than Alternatives for the first time based on health insurance reimbursements during the pre and post COVID era that I think Rob will get into in a minute. I'll announce that Alternatives rates for its employees a living wage is $15.74. And I'm happy to share that our starting pay is above that. We've made it our goal to try to keep pay above living wage, because as Pete has alluded to, it's kind of the bare minimum, right? So we want to do better. So now, after that announcement, I'll pass the microphone over to Rob Brown. He's a consultant for the Workers Center, and we'll share some insights as to the health insurance calculations and the living wage. Rob?
Thanks, Kevin. So the health insurance piece is the part of the living wage that always most confuses the heck out of everybody. Access to quality, affordable healthcare is quintessential to a decent standard of living and also a human right. And the pricing of health insurance is highly variable and is also cost of living that is frequently included in the base benefits package at places of employment. So when we're talking about the living wage health insurance float, to the extent that a benefits package from an employer may reduce the cost to the employee, not to the employer, reduce the cost to the employee of the health insurance component of the living wage. The specific living wage figure may fluctuate. I am very privileged to do the health insurance calculations with this study, and I appreciate the opportunity. If anybody's actually interested in the devilish math, I'd love to get into it with you sometime, but I'll spare everyone at the moment. But the dependencies between gross wages, net wages to afford cost of living, the various subsidies that people can receive for health insurance through the Affordable Care Act with purchasing plans through the New York State of Health Marketplace create a lot of variabilities. And this year, for the first time ever, the amount of assistance available to individuals purchasing insurance on their own through the exchange is more favorable than what employers have available. Basically, since the last time we did the living wage study, the available tax credits to people through the exchange have increased by a couple $1,000s, while other costs of living have gone up. This regulatory regime brings the overall cost of living down with the health insurance piece. Employers, however, while there are other economic incentives involved in that, do not have the same advantage. So this is why the alternatives rate, even offering a generous benefits package, is larger than the community rate, again, for the first time. And this current situation is going to be in place for another couple of years, and then we'll see what regulators do. I think that this landmark moment in the history of the living wage study really highlights the extreme impacts that public policy around health insurance and health care have on affordability. Who knows what's going to happen in another couple of years? We may face some significant whiplash if these assistance programs are reversed. We may see something else entirely. And I inevitably am going to put in my biennial plug that we wouldn't even have to be having this conversation at all if we had a unified, universal healthcare system for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob. I'm assuming that you're done at this point. I saw you turn your microphone off, but thank you very much for what you shared. We have a comment from Kevin in the chat. Just in case everybody didn't see it, he also wants to thank Eddie Moran, who participated from our staff with the study and will be continuing from here forward in helping with that assistance. Because I didn't hit record when I first started talking, for those of you who are live, please bear with me while I just thank everyone for being here again. I particularly saw some other folks come in that I may have missed. So just want to say, of course, thank you to former employees who were so active in leading this effort. I see Lenny Hockman, Carol Chernikoff, and Carl Graham here today. I'm thankful for all of you in the community who gathered for this important discussion, recognizing board members Leslie Ackerman and Christopher Teitelbaum that I see here, and members of the executive team, as I said, James Hunter, Chief Lending Officer, and Riley Shane, Chief Operating Officer, and Michelle Courtney Berry, Chief Marketing Officer. Eric, before we open the floor to questions from the media and the community, I'm thinking you must be really proud to be in a leadership position in this organization, not just for our mission, but also for our work with the living wage. So before I open the floor for questions, is there anything else you would like to add?
Thanks, Michelle. We passionately believe that employees who are treated fairly offer better member service. As an organization dedicated to creating economic opportunity and empowerment, we recognize that wages are a critical component in financial wellness and capability. Michelle, you can open it up.
Thank you, Eric. So my counterpart, like I said, in marketing is Grace. We'll be looking at for raised hand functions. It's easier if you use the raise hand function in Zoom than raise your hand physically, but if you're unable to use the raise hand function, we'll be scrolling through to see. Because this is a news conference, we'll open the floor first to our dedicated members of the news media, and then open the floor to the community. So does anybody have a question from the news media? Anyone? That's a first. I do see members here, so perhaps all your questions have been answered by the scintillating news release, the data, the link to the calculations, and the wonderful people assembled today who spoke. Does anybody from our distinguished community have any questions that they'd like to ask, or comments that they'd like to offer, or praise about Alternatives Federal Credit Union? Anyone? Going once. Going twice.
I see Carol has her hand raised.
Recognizing Carol Chernikov.
Hi, nice to see everybody, and congratulations on another good study. Just curious, the alternatives minimum starting wage is higher than the living wage this year. So are there adjustments to those wages or not?
I'm sorry, Carol. First of all, Carol Chernikov, our retired chief lending officer of 36 years. We were sorry to see Carol retire last May of 2020. So Carol, I'm not quite sure I understand your question. We raised our starting wage to $16 an hour. But the calculated living wage is $15.74. So we're just 26 cents above that right now.
And that's where the starting wage will stay, correct?
That's where the starting wage will stay for now. Every year we look at our wages, we look at the market, we look at what's fair, we look at the responsibilities involved. And at the moment, we're at $16.
Great, which is terrific. And I always admire alternatives for doing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Teresa Alt.
Undoubtedly, you looked at housing costs, and I'm just especially curious to know how they have changed in the past 2 years.
Kevin.
Yeah, we did look at that, and we used the most recent data we could find. Going on memory here, but if you follow the links, the charts are in there, and it'll show you the 2019 to the 2021 study. But I do believe it was a 9 or 10% increase over what it was 2 years ago. There were several items that were in a double-digit increase. Transportation, I think communication, healthcare, and taxes. So, but all that information is in the links that Michelle provided.
And will be available on our website.
Yeah, we'll put that link. It's inside the news release, but Grace, would you mind pulling that link out that directly goes to calculations and putting in the chat, please? I'm not sure which order, but I'll say Kathy, George, and then Christopher.
I actually just had praise for alternatives. You guys just helped one of our front desk supervisors get into a home, and she's a wonderful, wonderful human being and treats our guests like gems. And you guys just, you helped her get into a home, and I'm so appreciative that y'all were able to help her. So I just had praise. That's it.
Thank you so much, Kathy. George Ferrari.
Again, I'll add to Kathy's voice and thanks and recognition to both the alternatives and as well as the Workers Center organizations that are doing very important work. Just a question, I'm not sure I quite formulated it yet in my head, but so you talk about a living wage in Tompkins County. We know there's a lot of churn, right? People commute to work here, but they might live somewhere else, and people might live here and work in other places. So I'm wondering how expansive or regional you think you conceptualize this for? And over the years, what, if any, impact have you seen in contiguous counties to move forward in this kind of a work? I mean, we're sort of an asterisk county, I understand that, but I do think it's important that lived experiences, residency isn't always the place where people work, and people pull employees from other places. So if we could speak to that, I'd be curious about it.
Pete?
Yeah, so to be clear, the entire county comprises the Ithaca MSA, so it's definitely the entire county. From our perspective, that's why we're working for a county-wide living wage, because I think there's approximately between 10 and 15,000 people that commute into Tompkins alone. I mean, if we did living wage studies, I've always thought in the other surrounding counties, and we've been asked to do that to some extent. Rent in the contiguous counties is a lot cheaper, and that's probably the biggest item that kind of drives up the living wage. I don't know if Eric or other people have thoughts on this, George's question.
Pete, I'll add to that. First of all, I agree. We know that the housing prices in Ithaca and Tompkins County are unaffordable to many, and they're driven to the surrounding counties because it is cheaper to live there, primarily around rent and home ownership. Of course, their expenses are going to be higher for commuting, as is their carbon footprint, which is unfortunate. But the calculation that we do, and Kevin can expand on this since he was responsible for the calculation, it's really focusing on Tompkins County expenses. If somebody earns a salary in Tompkins County with a living wage and then lives in another county, our study doesn't really address that directly, other than that person probably has a few extra dollars to spend outside of Tompkins County.
Probably better repairing their car that breaks down for additional car use or things like that. And we're not seeing living wage studies in contiguous counties, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we haven't seen them. And Eric's right. I think Pete alluded to it. It's the Ithaca MSA, and that's where we're getting a lot of the data from when you're looking at the government studies. So I don't know where we'd have to go to find those exterior ones. Yeah, affordable transportation, there's no doubt that is plays a big role in people, especially that end of the spectrum. Finding and keeping jobs is their reliability of being able to get to the job site. So, while it's not addressed maybe in the study of itself, through our lending staff and through our lending products, we do try to make those affordable, reliable vehicle loans for people, so that because we understand more and more people are getting pushed further and further outside of the city and the county that work in those jobs here.
Thank you, Kevin. Carl put a note in the chat for everyone to take a look at. In the fall of 2020, we did receive an email from someone in Corning who said she was working on a living wage study. Don't know if the effort continues. In terms of questions, Christopher and then Cecilia.
Thanks, Michelle. Pete, I just want to say I was really glad that you raised the point that the living wage is really a subsistence wage, and it's really for one person. One of the major problems I run into in a lot of places where I've worked and supervised staff, especially in Ithaca, is that you have a lot of single parent households and so on who are actually not interested in having conversations about employer subsidized healthcare, because they what's the word I'm looking for? They're able to get health coverage through DSS or something like that, because they have several kids at home, and the living wage really doesn't work for them, right? It's too low because it's for them, it's enough, but then when you bring kids in. So I guess I'm being long-winded in asking, is there an attempt or an idea to really push that idea in the press and so on, that the living wage is really a subsistence wage, and it's really for one person? Because I think a lot of people, when they think about the living wage, they think that, oh, people are earning this and that should take care of them. right? When in fact, it's really keeping them right on that edge still if they have children at home or it's a one parent household, one income household, and so on. So do you guys have any plans to really sort of push that part of it, not to undermine the success of the living wage, but to really make people aware of the fact that it's not the final answer and we really should be, as you said, paying more. It's the starting point.
That's a really good question. And Chris, and I will say this, and I'm not going to be able to say too much. We've actually been working with a well-known international nonprofit the past couple of years that's pitched to do a national living wage employer certification program. And they're doing a lot of vetting, and we and the other 7 organizations similar to us around the country are working with them closely. And it's actually going to be based upon a family wage, which would be a much higher wage than what we have now. And they'll be working with locals as well. And the Workers Center has not made a decision how we're going to deal with that, whether we take that on, because that, the difference between $15.32 and potentially $25 an hour, is going to be a difference maker for quite a lot of employers, without a doubt.
If I could just add on to that too, we have talked about for our living wage putting a rider on that does address some of the costs of being a single parent or other factors outside of the single person calculation. The living wage is a calculation based on what it costs a single person to live, but we know that many people are in different circumstances than that. And so we'd like to measure and know what it actually costs. We have employees who are single parents and in circumstances where even more than a living wage isn't enough. And it's good for us as an employer to know the financial impact and the financial stresses that are going on in the organization. And while we're proud that the $16 an hour that we're paying is more than a living wage, we'd like to get it up higher. It's still not a great wage for a lot of people who are trying to make it in this county and get ahead. And so, strategically, we'll be looking forward over the next years to see what we can do to get it higher.
I see Cecilia, Eddie, and Lenny.
This is Tom Stern, kind of in place of Cecilia. So I just had this question regarding all the new development that's coming in Ithaca. I'm wondering if there's any institutional push to ensure that employees that see the result of this development are going to receive a livable wage.
Would like to take that from the panel, Pete? Thank you.
Well, I don't know if I can speak to this in great detail. I know that the IURA, Ithaca Urban Renewal, that's part of the city, it actually very much takes living wage alternatives rate into account when they award, when they allow development to take place that's going to be subsidized, that's going to get tax subsidies from the city. I don't know if I can say much more than that, though. But that I know much more than that.
Thank you, Pete. Eddie?
Hello. I just wanted to sort of address something that Christopher had brought up. And I just wanted to let you know that I do sit on the committee that's looking at the studies for the years to come. And that is something that we are aware of. And we are actively looking into having some sort of measurement for people who have families. And very similarly to what was put in the chat, something along the lines of a household size, which I'm sure you can understand gets very challenging as we start to incorporate larger and larger family sizes. So I just wanted to address the fact that that is something we have been looking at, we have recognized, and we are looking to address in the years to come.
Thanks, Eddie. Lenny?
In addition to Rob's suggestion for universal health care, we obviously need universal child care. That would address what you're talking about. And I just want to make a comment that I am really heartened to see the continuation of this work that we started in '94. I was wondering what would happen, and especially after Carl left. So I am so pleased to see that you're all continuing this good work.
Yes. Thank you, Lenny. Kevin.
I just wanted to add on to what Ed was saying, in that, you know, there are these other things, and while, you know, the main number may not change, if this is the living wage for a single individual, if we can offer those addendums and get the employers to use it, if they recognize that, well, I'm hiring mostly single parent staff, or I'm hiring staff that one adult has to stay home with the kids because of the healthcare issues and that, then they should be using it and adding those charts to it to see what is fair, right? To pay their employees if they're using it in the correct way. So the base may not change because you would lose the perspective of it over time. Adding more addendums to it, I think we're going to look if that's going to be a useful tool going forward.
Yeah, and I'll just add on, Lenny, you're so right about universal health care. I'm sorry, childcare, because it's heartbreaking when we take a look at some of the childcare costs that our lowest paid staff are paying every month. You know, sometimes over $1,000 a month in childcare costs or close to it. And, you know, how could they possibly afford that? So, yeah, the living wage is a great starting point, but we need so much more.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. We recognize that we're over time, but many of alternative staff are able to stay in place for any of your follow-up questions that you might have. As we say in the release, we know that a living wage is so vital because it benefits employees, but it also has advantages to businesses, reducing employee turnover and absenteeism, lowering recruitment and training costs, and improving morale and commitment to the business or the organization. We thank all of you for coming today. We know that you're really busy. We don't know how many Zoom meetings you have to follow or how many in person now that we're getting more out into in person. I have an in person this afternoon. I was kind of shocked by it. I was looking for the Zoom link and it was an address and I was like, oh, I'm going there. That's a chamber event later today. I see Jennifer Tavares here. Hi, Jennifer. To all of you who've come and spent time with us, we really appreciate you. And like I said, we're able to stay for just a little bit if you have anything else. If not, we wish you a really wonderful day and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Michelle. This is Stacy Demas, Chief of Staff to Assemblymember Kellis, and she wanted me to relay her deep gratitude for the credit union as well as the Workers Center for all their committed work, and appreciates also the importance of recognizing that universal healthcare and childcare are vitally important, particularly overcoming the pandemic and rebuilding our communities to be stronger. And also to remind everyone that, of course, they have an ally in the county, or not a county legislature, in the state legislation. I'm sure you have the support as well in the county legislature, but just remind everyone you do have allies, and we are always welcome, or everyone here is welcome to reach out to our office. So thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. We appreciate what you said and the support from your office. As I dropped my glasses, so I can't see anyone's name. Anybody have anything else for us? Again, we'll have, what should we call it, Eric? The living wage after lounge, after party?
Yeah, we can't serve anything virtually, but yes.
And in the chat, you should see contact information for all of us. If there's anything else you need as a follow-up, you usually know how to reach me, but it's mberry@alternatives.org. I also put Pete's contact information and Kevin's, and I'll put Eric's in the chat as well. Thanks, Jennifer. See you later. Carl, you'll hear a lot, everyone saying, I don't know how things could go on. It was hard for me to get out of bed the next day, but I eventually did recognize that you did retire, but you are sorely missed. We really appreciate all the hard work that you put into the living wage effort and the campaigns that you lobbied on behalf of workers and employees in our great region. So thank you again for this legacy, and thank you for all of for Lenny and Carol and all of the work that you all did so that we could continue the work forward today.
Here. Thanks for coming, Carl.
Thank you, Michelle. And this is much more important than any individual. And it's wonderful to see that it has become, well, it couldn't help but become embedded into the work that Alternatives does for the community. So thanks to Eric and to Kevin and to the board, to Pete and the Workers Center, for everyone who's continuing this, because it is so important to this community.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.